Good evening and welcome to Business Insider's 2020 Republican primary debate. I'm the politics editor at Business Insider, Anthony Fisher.
And I'm Lynette Lopez, a columnist at Business Insider. Tonight, we'll hear from two Republicans challenging President Donald Trump for their party's nomination in 2020. Former Massachusetts Governor Bill Weld and former Illinois Congressman Joe Walsh. Thank you.
Business Insider is committed to providing candidates of both parties a chance to speak with voters. We encourage our viewers to look beyond their personal networks and consider ideas and perspectives that don't easily fit in red or blue boxes. In tonight's debate, the candidates will answer questions on economics, immigration, climate, foreign policy, and America's deepening political divide. We want to know how the candidates differ from the president and why they think they could do a better job.
President Trump did not respond to our invitation to this event, and Governor Mark Sanford had a scheduling conflict.
Here are the rules. Each candidate will have 60 seconds to speak when recognized by a moderator. A candidate may also get an additional 30 seconds to respond to follow-ups. Time will be deducted if the rules are not respected.
The speaking order and podium spots were chosen at random 2 weeks ago. Congressman Walsh, you will start. You have 1 minute for your opening statement.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody who came. Business Insider, thank you. Governor Bill Weld, it's an honor, sir, to stand on the same stage with you. Let me start like this. The President of the United States will be impeached very, very soon. The President of the United States will deserve to be impeached very, very soon. Look, let's cut through all the craziness, right? We're going to spend the next hour, hour and a half, as Anthony and Lynette said, talking about really important issues, climate change, trade, what's going on down at the border. But let's be clear, this is about Trump. This is about that guy in the White House. I wouldn't be standing in front of you. I wouldn't be standing next to Governor Bill Weld if Donald Trump wasn't president. Donald Trump is unfit. He lies almost every time he opens his mouth. He's a danger to this country. He cannot put anybody else's interest ahead of his own. I'm not debating Bill Weld. I got all the respect in the world for Bill Weld. Bill Weld, I believe, like me, knows and understands what the problem is. And the problem is an unfit president in the White House who took a divided country and is dividing it even more.
That's your time.
We got to bring the country together.
Thank you, Congressman. Governor, you're...
Let me add my thanks to Business Insider and panelists, moderators Fisher and Lopez and Blodgett. It's a great thing you're doing. My name is Bill Weld. I'm running for President of the United States as a Republican. So what do you need to know about me since I'm running for president? I think all you really need to know about me is that I'm a very relaxed, calm person. And like the congressman, I'm comfortable in my own skin, unlike certain other people. You know, I'm not scared of anybody. I was head of the criminal division of the Justice Department. But more to the point, I don't think anyone else should be scared of anybody. And, you know, I'm a great believer in releasing the energies of everybody in the polity and giving them all a stake in the enterprise of our shared democratic institutions. As the congressman said, it's no secret that the president is seeking to divide us, and it's really hateful. So my promise to you is if you elect me as your president, you never again will have to feel exhausted or tired on account of your government in Washington that's supposed to be serving you. Thank you.
Thank you, Governor, and thank you both. So, gentlemen, slow news day, huh? Not much to talk about, except about 2 hours ago, Speaker Nancy Pelosi announced that she would begin impeachment proceedings against the President of the United States for the 4th time in the history of our republic. Governor, I'll start with you. Do you have a message for Mitch McConnell, who seems to be the largest impediment to a smooth impeachment proceeding?
Well, I have a message for Mitch McConnell specifically, and I worked on the Nixon impeachment, as some of you know, years ago. And it took the House 8-10 months to get through the investigation before it even got ready to go to the Senate. And when an impeachment is voted by the House and goes to the Senate, the House appoints 6 managers or prosecutors to handle it in the Senate. They make the rules. Mitch McConnell doesn't make the rules. So those people who think that as soon as it goes to the Senate, Mitch McConnell can call a vote and get an acquittal rammed through, that's not true. If the House and the Senate take as long as they did proportionally in the Nixon impeachment, this thing would not be over until after the election. Meanwhile, cold, hard facts, Trump's enemies, cold, hard facts from evidence under oath will have been hammered out in those proceedings. I think it's a nightmare for Donald Trump, and he has no way of stopping it before the election.
Thank you, Governor. Congressman, to Mitch McConnell.
Well, Mitch McConnell and all the Republicans, how disappointing. Because, look, Governor Weld and I are going to say a bunch of things about the president up here for the next hour and a half. And I guarantee you, most Republicans up on Capitol Hill, they feel in private exactly what we say publicly. This president, you read the Mueller report 5 months ago, and you understand that this president obstructed justice, that he lied. He ordered other people to lie. It was clear when you read the Mueller report that this president believes he's above the law. I don't give a damn what party you are. No party should put up with that. Lynette, this Ukrainian thing today, this is just the cherry on top. So is it any surprise that Donald Trump picked up a phone 2 months ago, called the president of Ukraine, and said, you know what, I'm not going to give you this aid unless you dig up dirt on Joe Biden? It's not a surprise because, Lynette, Donald Trump, what was it with ABC News, told us 3 months ago he'd take dirt from a foreign government. He deserves to be impeached, and everybody should keep their boots on top of these Republicans so that they follow their constitutional
Congressman,
duty.
thank you. That's time. But the next question is about this Ukraine issue and the fact that the Republican Party has been silent about it so far. How should the American people feel about that? Congressman, you can respond first.
Well, they ought to be upset. It's hard to be disappointed in Donald Trump anymore because this isn't a surprise. It's not. But again, these Republicans, I was in Congress 8-9 years ago. These Republicans, they claim that they believe in the rule of law. They believe in limited government. They believe in a restrained executive. The Republican Party establishment, I want to be careful what I say because I'm not, Lynette, talking about Republican Party voters. But the Republican Party establishment, the party bosses, they are a cult. They've abandoned everything they believe in to worship this guy every single day. Again, that should offend all of us. And by the way, the Republican brand under this president is horrible. So I don't know why you're defending them. They shouldn't.
Governor, you called this Ukraine business, quote, treason, pure and simple.
Well, I think the Ukraine caper by the president is some combination of treason, bribery, and other high crimes and misdemeanors. The one thing that's absolutely clear is that it's grounds for removal from office. You have a sitting president of the United States essentially selling the results of an American presidential election in which he's a candidate and rigging it in his favor against another candidate corruptly. The end of the Mueller report makes it very plain that any activity the president takes, this president, to benefit himself or his family, politically or financially, is a corrupt action. And this suspending the aid and then immediately calling up the president and saying, do this to kill Biden, and meanwhile, $400 million is no longer there as of 3 or 4 days before the call. How stupid are we supposed to be? How stupid is the president of Ukraine supposed to be? He knows exactly what Mr. Trump is saying to him, and it's vastly illegal.
For the record, Lynette, can I jump in? And I got all the respect in the world from my friend Bill Weld. I don't want Trump hung for treason. I just want him impeached.
Okay.
And
well, we'll talk about hanging some other time.
I'll go with that.
We'll talk about hanging some other
Don't
time. We're going to move on to the next question. How's that? Okay. This is a family show. Okay. And to everyone who has read or watched Business Insider before, it is no secret that I am highly critical of the president, but you guys are Republicans, and he is the head of your party, and he has delivered on Republican mainstays like appointing conservative judges and cutting taxes. So I'll put this to you, Governor, first. Are you not concerned that running against the president could hand the White House to, say, Elizabeth Warren?
No, I mean, I think, first of all, as governor, I never met a tax cut I didn't like. I cut taxes 21 times, and I never raised them, so I'm not going to criticize the tax cut, although obviously it could have been more equitable. But this president is not a fiscal conservative. He's gone along with these trillion-dollar deficits every year. I was ranked the most fiscally conservative governor in the United States, and I was governor of Massachusetts after 3 terms of Michael Dukakis, so that took some doing. But no, we simply can't sit still for this guy who's a disgrace to the office. Almost every day, as the congressman has said, he commits some deed or utters some word that makes it clear beyond any doubt that he's unfit for the office of President of the United States. I wrote the book on what was grounds for impeachment of a president when I was working on the Nixon impeachment. And every day the president transgresses that line. So, no, we can't worry about the general election. All we can do is the duty that's staring us right in the face right now.
Thank you, Governor. Congressman, think about it. President Bernie Sanders.
You know, Lynette, I've been asked this question a bunch. Is Joe Walsh going to weaken Donald Trump if he challenges him in a primary? Hell yes. That's the point. I want to weaken him. I would like to beat him. I'm sure Governor Weld feels the same way. I do not want him to be our nominee. Period. Look, I'm a conservative, right? You know that, Lynette. Governor Bill Weld knows that. I'm a conservative. I probably agree with Bernie Sanders on maybe that many issues. I don't know. There may be a few more issues I agree on with Elizabeth Warren. But we have everything our founding, listen to me, we have everything our founding fathers feared. I don't care how old or young you are, in the White House right now. That's a hell of a lot more important than a tax cut for somebody like me.
Thank you. And now on to specifics about the Trump administration. Many Republicans have praised the president's deregulatory push, especially around rules around the environment. The Heritage Foundation says that Trump administration rollbacks have saved the country $33 billion in regulatory funds. So let's hear from the president talking about that about 2 weeks ago.
Working with Republicans in Congress, we slashed 30,000 pages of regulations from the Federal Register. Government will no longer try to micromanage every rain puddle and every drainage ditch on private land.
Governor Weld, isn't that something Republicans should be excited about?
No, it is not. And the regulations that the president has rolled back are regulations dear to my heart to protect clean air and clean water in the United States. I'm a lifelong environmentalist. The Republican Party has a rich tradition in conserving our environment. Theodore Roosevelt starting the National Park Service. It goes all the way back to Abraham Lincoln. The Clean Water Act and the Clean Air Act were enacted when Richard Nixon was president of the United States. And Mr. Trump is tossing that out the window in order to slake his unbelievable desire to do whatever might be beneficial to the coal companies. And he's turning the country upside down because he wants, if nothing else, for the coal companies to like him. He's a very insecure individual who has to be liked and patted. That's why he had his cabinet have to praise him going around the room at the beginning. But they deserve no credit for their deregulative efforts in the environmental area. The only other regs they've really rolled back are the regs designed to protect little people in the event of another 2008 financial crisis. Nice work, Mr. President.
Thank you, Governor. Congressman.
Look, like every issue we're going to talk about tonight, it's a balance, right? The environment and small businessmen and women in this country. You talk to small businessmen and women in this country like I have over the last 8 or 9 years, they've been more burdened by government regulations than they have taxes. So it is a balance, right? We want to be good stewards of the environment. We want to acknowledge that climate change exists. My party, too many people think it's a hoax. But don't forget about those small businessmen and women all over this country who have been unduly burdened by government regulations over the years. We're trying to find the balance. Has Trump gone too far? Well, probably, yeah, because pretty much with everything he goes too far.
Thank you. So once upon a time, it feels like a long time ago, Republicans used to care about fiscal conservatism. They used to care about the U.S. budget deficit, which is how much more the government spends than it takes in revenue. Under President Trump, the deficit has exploded to over $1 trillion. So, Congressman, I thought you were a deficit hawk. That's how you came into Congress?
Hey, Lynette, nothing disappoints me more than this. I mean, this is why I went to Congress 8 years ago, because we're bankrupting future generations. We are bankrupting future generations in this country. Both parties do it. And Lynette, you're right. You've got me. Because when Obama was president, all of us Republicans screamed and howled every day about Obama increasing the debt and the deficits. Lynette's right. Trump has actually increased the debt faster than Barack Obama did. Think about that. Trump has increased our deficits faster than Obama has. But, Lynette, all of my former Tea Party colleagues in Congress, what do we hear from them? Not a damn thing. Again, just one more example of the Republican Party now pays fealty to Trump, and they've forgotten about every issue that they claimed to believe in.
Governor.
So my motto when I was in office is there's no such thing as government money. There's only taxpayers' money. Boy, has everyone in Washington forgotten about that. Everyone, not just Donald Trump. There's nobody looking out for the taxpayers there. The Dems want to raise spending by 5 or 10% on social programs. The Rs want to raise it on military. So they demonize each other until they've both raised enough money to all get reelected. Then they declare a special meeting to smoke the peace pipe, and they agree to compromise by raising everything 20%. It's a total disgrace, and Trump has raised it faster than anybody else. He hit $1 trillion in month 10. His multi-year budget added $9 trillion to the deficit.
So do you keep the Trump tax cuts?
Oh, I would keep them. I told you I never met a tax.
But then where do you cut?
Oh, you cut across the board. You have to zero base the budget and not assume you start with last year's appropriation. You have to measure outcomes instead of inputs, which is how much money was spent last year. That should be irrelevant. If it was a good program, increase it. If it wasn't, zero it out. That's how you cut spending, and I did it.
Thank you, Governor.
Lynette, just to add on to what the governor said, it shouldn't have been a tax cut for the wealthy, which is primarily what Trump's tax cut was. It should have been a payroll tax cut that middle-class Americans would have felt. But look, the governor's right. Republicans and Democrats don't get this. We have a spending problem, and both parties like to spend a lot of money. And you listen to these Democrats, we're going to spend a lot of time rapping on Trump tonight, but you look at these Democrats, all genuine, and there are a lot of good things they want to do, but they never talk about how much these things are going to cost.
Congressman, thank you. I'm going to give you another 30 seconds because Congressman.
I purposely said his name so that you would.
Congressman. Governor.
No, just in terms of cutting the budget, this builds on what I did when I was in office. Let's say you have a preventive health program which avoids a lot of bad outcomes and delivers good savings in the health area. You might multiply that appropriation by 10. But if you have a bureaucracy that nobody can quite tell you where it came from, probably a relationship between some long-dead U.S. senator and some equally long-dead chair of Ways and Means, you cut that to zero. And that's where the big money is. And you have to have the political will to do that and not say there's a bunch of sacred cows in the budget. No more sacred cows.
Thank you, Governor. So, guys, business investment is down. Manufacturing is in a slump. And central banks around the world are preparing for an economic slowdown. We here in the United States have already cut taxes, and President Trump has already pushed the Federal Reserve to lower interest rates, which it did last week. So, how do you get the country on the right financial footing within the first 100 days? What policies do you enact? Governor, you can go first.
Well, one thing I would do is stop doing foreign policy and foreign economic measures with taxes and just putting sanctions on everybody and tariffs. The president says, I'm a tariff man. I mean, it's an emblem of how ignorant he is in foreign policy. We tried tariffs with Smoot and Hawley in the 1930s, and they greatly deepened the Great Recession. And Mr. Trump thinks that when he slaps a tariff on China, it's paid by China back in Beijing. It's not. It's paid by American farmers or American businesses or individuals who need to import something from China that contains steel or aluminum, and everybody knows it. Mr. Trump thinks that a car made in North America is made by either the United States or Mexico. It's a zero-sum game, so we have to beat up on the Mexicans. He doesn't understand that the average car made in North America travels across the U.S.-Mexico border 22 times, because depending on the wage scale for that stage of production. So everybody makes out better with free trade, and the United States always makes out best because we have the highest productivity per worker, so we get the high-wage jobs.
Thank you, Governor. Congressman, first 100 days, how do you fix it?
I am probably going to say too much tonight, and my campaign manager will scold me tonight because I will say too much that it's not about the issues, it's about Trump. You talk to anybody in the business community right now. You talk to investors, you talk to small businessmen and women. They don't know what Trump's doing from hour to hour. This uncertainty that this president has unleashed. He wakes up every morning, you don't know who the hell he's going to attack with a tweet. You don't know what private business he's going to go after. The uncertainty, the hour by hour, where the heck is this president going, has everybody in the business community on edge, and so they're not investing, they're not hiring. This is where your slowdown is coming from, along with what Governor Weld said. These tariffs are finally beginning to have an impact on the country. In the first 100 days, I'd get rid of the tariffs, and I wouldn't tweet crazy crap every morning.
You heard it first, guys. No tweeting in the Walsh administration. Thank God.
Well, I'll tweet, Lynette, but not crazy stuff. Tweet.
Okay. Some economists blame the slowing economy on Trump's trade war with China, as we just discussed. President Trump has put tariffs on a slew of goods, from washing machines to soybeans. And while many Americans disagree with Trump's methods on handling this issue, they do agree that the U.S. relationship with China economically needs to change. So, without tariffs, how do you change that relationship? Congressman, you can go first.
China cheats, but they don't just cheat against us. They cheat against the whole world, and they've been doing it for a long time, Lynette. So in comes Trump, and what does Trump do right away? He lays down and throws down tariffs against everybody, and he goes at China all by himself. And so who pays the price? We do, our farmers, small businessmen and women, again, and American consumers. The mistake, you got to deal with China, Lynette. The mistake Trump made is he put us out there on an island all by ourselves. Instead of rallying the whole world, rallying a coalition, maybe, Lynette, getting us back in the Trans-Pacific Partnership, right, where we could have a coalition of countries that could deal with China. He's done it all by himself, and America has paid a big, big price for that. You got to bring the world together to fight China.
So, Governor, you signed TPP. What do you do?
Oh, I absolutely would join TPP in a heartbeat. I point out that during the campaign, candidate Trump said, no, we can't join the Trans-Pacific Partnership because it will be dominated by China. He's so incurious and so ignorant about foreign affairs that he didn't know that China is not a member of TPP. The whole idea was that we would have a consortium of 12 Pacific-facing nations, some in Asia, some in the Americas, without China at the table. So it would be our beachhead in Asia. So no, all the treaties that he's ripped up, even the treaty with Iran, he's now scrounging around trying to get back to where he was at square one before he ripped up the 2015 deal with Iran. I think the relationship with China has to be a complex one. We're the two biggest players out there. Xi Jinping, I had high hopes for when he came in, but he really has re-subsidized all those SOEs, the state-owned enterprise. And we're getting our brains beat in around the world, and on intellectual property, they are complete scofflaws. So you got to be tough, and I think we'll probably return to this.
Thank you, Governor. Gentlemen, we're going to take a question from our online audience, and this is about automation. According to a recent Brookings report, a quarter of U.S. jobs could be disrupted by automation. Nearly every occupation in the United States could be affected. Governor, I'll go to you first. What would you do proactively to deal with automation and the jobs that will be lost due to it?
First of all, no one in Washington, least of all President Trump, is doing the slightest thing about this. And I agree we're going to lose 15 to 25% of our jobs in the next 10 years owing to artificial intelligence and drones and robotics and machine learning and driverless vehicles, which is going to take care of long-haul truckers. But there's good news also, is there will be replacement jobs with technical skills, which would be higher wage jobs than those that are lost. So we got to plan how to get the technical skills necessary into the hands of those workers. I ran the numbers here. It would be child's play, 1/3% of a state's budget to make those displaced workers get free community college or post-secondary education to acquire those skills. To govern is to choose, and I chose as a governor, and even without federal help, the states could take care of that, be like kind of a mini GI Bill, and it wouldn't be free for everybody, like Bernie Sanders says. It would just be for the displaced workers, and you would get them having higher wages and a happy ending in a more affluent society. Artificial intelligence is going to create enormous wealth in the United States because of making everything more efficient. The federal government should take charge of harnessing, identifying and harnessing that wealth for the benefit of the citizens.
Thank you, Congressman. Thank you, Congressman.
I tried to be a member of Congress. It didn't work out.
Sad about that. Sad about that.
I'd love to be a governor. Governor Wells right. Look, the government's got to play a role here, but on so many of these issues, I so believe in American ingenuity and American innovation. You're not stopping automation. It's not stopping. And it is, as the governor said, it's a good thing. It's making the American economy more efficient and more productive. Our manufacturing sector is actually a hell of a lot more productive and efficient now with fewer workers. So what does government need to do? Help retrain those workers. Because you can't stop the market. You got to keep the market going. You got to keep the market changing. It'll lead to good things. But government's got to play a role as the American economy goes through these seminal moments where we move from one industry to another.
So do you buy
Displacing
what the
workers.
governor is saying, that it's not going to cost that much, that states can take care of it?
States can take care of it, but the federal government's got to play a role here, too. This is a major transformation in our economy, this automation thing, artificial intelligence. The federal government, along with state governments, have got to devote resources to train all of these displaced
Thank you,
workers.
Congressman.
According to a recent Kaiser poll, more than half of Republicans believe human activity is affecting the world's climate. Younger Republicans are also increasingly concerned about the environment. Governor Weld, you just called yourself an environmentalist. What is your plan to win over the Republicans who still deny established climate science?
Well, my plan is to state what obviously needs to be done, which is to meet the outcome that's necessary to avoid catastrophic climate change. And that is to prevent global temperatures from rising more than 1.5 degrees centigrade between now and 2050. That's the injunction from the UN framework and of the Paris Accord. And it's very simple. We have to put a price on carbon upstream at the wellhead for oil companies, at the mine shaft for mining companies, at the loading dock for LNG being imported. Even agriculture is going to have to pay a bit, but you put a price on carbon. That has to be either a congressional statute, or I think it's such a national emergency that this might be the rare, proper exercise of emergency powers.
But do you think that argument will win over Republican voters?
Well, it's just so clearly the right thing. I mean, the other thing I say here is that the Democrats are off base because, like with the budget, they're doing inputs. My plan will cost $16 trillion. That's Sanders. 1.7 trillion. That's Biden. And in between, and they talk about how much they're going to spend. They don't talk about putting a price on carbon, which will allow the market to lower the amount of carbon in the atmosphere.
Congressman, is climate a concern of yours?
Yeah, the Republican Party had better get on board or they're done. This is the issue that concerns most young Americans. And I don't want to sound like way too basic here, but the party's got to acknowledge the facts that it exists. And too often Republicans, and this is an issue, Anthony, where I've moved on, acknowledge that it's real, acknowledge that on this 4.5 billion-year-old planet, the climate changes, and we've been on this planet for how long, and clearly we're impacting this environment. Just to get the Republican Party, I know that seems like a baby step, but just to get the Republican Party to acknowledge the obvious is a big step. And if we don't, Anthony, if we don't do this, because this train's going, we won't even be at the table. And I don't want, I have all the respect in the world for Congresswoman AOC, but I don't want a Green New Deal. I don't want the Democrats coming in and just revolutionizing the whole American economy through heavy hand of government. But if Republicans don't sit at the table and acknowledge it's a problem, that's going to happen.
Thank you, Congressman. I'd like both of you to answer a very simple yes or no question. Just a yes or no, please. Congressman,
That's hard.
Would you rejoin the Paris Climate Accords?
No.
Governor Weld?
Immediately.
Immediately. Thank you.
Can I explain?
Unit at a time.
No.
Protecting coal industry jobs was a major part of President Trump's 2016 campaign. Let's take a listen.
And we've ended the war on clean, beautiful coal, and we are putting, and you see it better than almost anybody, our coal miners. They're all back to work, and they're going back to work. Clean coal, clean coal.
Coal does produce about a third of America's energy, but it is a major contributor of greenhouse gases. And according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, jobs in solar and wind technologies are two of America's fastest growing occupations. Congressman, under your administration, would the future of America's energy be coal, green energy, or something else entirely?
Well, it'd be all the above, but it probably wouldn't be much coal. See, that's a lie. That's President Trump saying, I'm going to build the wall and Mexico is going to pay for it. When President Trump said that, and he said stuff like that a bunch, he knew and he knows that the coal industry is dying in this country, and it should be dying in this country because it's being replaced by cleaner forms of energy, natural gas and nuclear. I mean, we lost 15% of our coal output 2 years ago under President Trump. We're on track to lose 20% of our coal output this year. It's a good thing. It should be replaced. It's dirty, but it's an all the above thing. We've got, again, we talk about a balance with every issue. Balance our use of fossil fuels, knowing that the future is renewables.
Thank you.
But
Governor,
it's not coal.
Pardon. Governor, what is your energy
There's
policy?
no room for coal or oil. I say not with a heavy heart, but with a light heart. It's going to be just exhilarating not to be dependent on foreign oil. No room for coal or oil in our energy mix. It's going to be renewables. Where I get off the Green New Deal bus is a couple things. Number one, although AOC had nuclear in her first draft, the beautiful people made her take it out, because it has waste.
There were a lot of things
waste.
in that first draft.
Therefore, it's dirty. Therefore, we're not going to love it. We're not going to embrace it. I think you have to embrace nuclear power. So does the Union of Concerned Scientists. So do most responsible environmentalists. I think it should be 25% of our base. I've been around to a lot of underpopulated counties who would love to have, and most of them have nukes already, another nuclear plant. It's a big employer. It's a great neighbor, and I'm not talking about building a ginormous plant on a barrier reef, which is what they did at Fukushima. I'm talking about essentially vest pocket nuclear plants, and I think they're the wave of the future. It's been done in Europe with great impact. So that's point number one on the Green New Deal. The other one is...
Sorry, Governor, that's time. Thank you. We're back. I apologize for the technical difficulties. I apologize particularly to you, Congressman Walsh. Let's get back into it. A drone attack recently crippled Saudi Arabia's oil production facilities. President Trump has responded by deploying U.S. troops to the kingdom, and there are concerns of a hot war between Iran and Saudi Arabia breaking out. As president, how would you deal with the increasingly complicated U.S.-Saudi relationship?
I would be honest with the Saudis, because Republican Democrat after Democrat president, Republican president after Democrat president through the years have not been. Look, Iran's the biggest threat in the Middle East. Saudi Arabia is no great guy either, okay? So I worry about, with these troops, us getting further involved in a region that we shouldn't get involved in. Our men and women ought to be home from Afghanistan by now. We support Israel, and we've got to do whatever we can to encourage that part of the world to move toward a democracy. But I don't like us placing resources in there, especially placing American troops. And one final point, Anthony, is the Trump administration, I think Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said Iran did it. We're in this weird, scary place where we don't believe what our own president says. I mean, think about that. We don't believe what Iran tells us. We don't believe what Saudi Arabia tells us. But the rest of the world right now doesn't believe what a United States president says.
Thank you, Congressman.
That's troubling.
Governor, how would you handle a U.S.-Saudi relationship?
Well, one of the things that troubles me about Mr. Trump in the foreign area is he claims to be a non-interventionist, but he's awful quick on sending those troops. You know, a couple of months ago, he said, after a discussion with his national security advisor, I'm sending 5,000 more troops to the Middle East immediately. Well, they never got there because he must have had a second thought or a third thought, but he never said what it was for. I'm not quite clear why we're sending troops to Saudi Arabia to defend their oil supplies. Don't they have any troops? over there? I know they have a lot of weapons because we sold them all to Saudi Arabia, but maybe we should make sure they know how to fly those planes and fire those missiles. I don't get it. Boots on the ground to another country for regime change or to correct something that we see in the other country that we don't like. That's the height of the lesson learned from the Iraq War. We shouldn't do that. I agree with the congressman. Our troops should have been home from Afghanistan a long time ago. We've been there 18 years. People say, oh, we can't bring them home now, to which the response, it begs the question, when? How about never? Does never work for you? Because that's what they really mean.
Thank you, Governor. I'd like to take a question from our online audience. In 2015, the Supreme Court made same-sex marriage legal in all 50 states. But according to the Public Religion Research Institute, almost half of Republicans oppose same-sex marriage. Governor Weld, you signed one of the earliest laws legalizing same-sex partnerships at the state level. What do you say to members of your own party who still are hostile to gay and trans rights?
I say you got to get with it. You just have to wrap your mind around that, and I'm just so sorry. But I came out for LGBTQ rights before anybody else did. I was by myself for 20 years on that. I appointed the woman who wrote the opinion holding that same-sex marriage is constitutionally required under both the Equal Protection Clause and the Due Process Clause. It became part of the foundation for the U.S. Supreme Court decision. I appointed a slew of lesbian judges, gays and lesbians, to my cabinet. I presided over the marriage of 2 gay members of my cabinet. So I'm what you might call all in on this issue. One of the first things I did was to appoint a commission on gay and lesbian youth. We had a rash of suicides in central Massachusetts as a result of bullying in our high schools.
Governor, your record's clear. What I asked was, how are you going to reach Republican voters who are still hostile to gay and trans rights?
Well, I'll tell them things like the story about the gay suicides and relate stories of people, including Mayor Pete, who I've gotten to know and like a great deal on the campaign trail. He's very quick to say the most important thing in his life was decided by a 5-4 vote of the Supreme Court.
Thank you so much,
he
Governor.
Understands from Supreme Court judges.
Congressman Walsh, sorry, I have a question for you. Last month, the advocacy group GLAAD said that you have, quote, used the power of your public profile to repeatedly attack the LGBT community. How do you respond?
First off, on your first question, Anthony, look, same-sex marriage is the law of the land. And how are we going to get Republican voters to eventually embrace it? This is one of those issues where it's going to take time. And we have to let time play itself out. And I think the answer for most Republican voters eventually is the family. Is over the next number of years seeing loving same-sex parents parent their kids. Republican voters, Anthony, conservatives that I've spoken to for years on the radio, they value the family, the nuclear family, a together family more than anything. I think as the months and the years go by, and they see that loving children can be raised by same-sex parents, this is one of those issues that will eventually move Republican opinion.
I'd like you to respond very briefly to the question of GLAAD saying that you've used the power of your public profile to repeatedly attack the LGBTQ community.
No, I disagree with that vehemently. I've used the power of my public profile to go at the issue and talk about the issue and try to find common ground on the issue. I'm a big supporter of anybody, gay, lesbian, straight, or transgender, serving in the military. This is one of those issues, though, where when you've got strong-minded people on one side or another side pushing it too hard for the American people instead of trying to find an area of compromise. For instance, being able to use whatever washroom facilities or shower facilities according to the sex that you identify as. Fine. People in America should have that freedom to be able to do that. But we've got to think about the people, say, in high school situations, other students, 17 and 18-year-olds, Anthony, who may be uncomfortable with that.
Thank you.
So finding common ground.
Thank you. I'd like to ask both of you this question. A significant number of President Trump's supporters say they back him because of his willingness to say outrageous and offensive things. In their view, Trump is a necessary reaction to an overly sensitive culture of political correctness. Congressman, do you agree with that perspective? You have 60 seconds.
Yeah. Yes. I'm done. Yes. Look, it's a great time to be alive, and we're divided. I've been in the business of trying to break down political correctness for years, because I want honest dialogue. I do a podcast back home called Uncomfortable Conversations with a black radio host from Chicago. He's the black guy, I'm the white guy. We sit down for an hour and we talk about these uncomfortable issues like race and racism. How come black people and white people look at the police differently? How come black people don't like the Republican Party? We have these conversations because I abhor Americans who don't want us talking about sensitive issues. I so believe in free speech. And I get really worked up when we try to shut down, Anthony, speech we don't agree with. And this political correctness, the cancel culture, you said something 5 years ago, now you can't get a job now.
Thank you, Congressman.
We're way too sensitive on that stuff.
Governor Weld, do you agree with the perspective of many Trump supporters that he is a necessary reaction to an overly sensitive culture of political correctness?
Yeah, I think that's spot on for how he got elected. I thought his most powerful line was, "I'm going to drain the swamp." Like the congressman, I've always been known as politically incorrect, perhaps because I spoke truth to power before it was fashionable. You know, I felt the same way about bureaucracy in Washington. It used to drive me crazy. My little diatribe about the budget, you can tell, don't get me started about bureaucracies. And that's what the president was, the current president, then candidate, was talking about when he said he wanted to drain the swamp.
Well, draining the swamp and the bureaucracy is different than pushing back on political correctness and what a lot of conservatives would call identity politics.
Well, I found it very refreshing how unpolitically correct he was. And I remember in the early going thinking that he was the most refreshing of the candidate. At least he didn't stand around on one foot and crane his neck and look uncomfortable and look the other way from away from Donald Trump wherever he was standing. You know, in the early going, he was quite an appealing candidate. The problem is we know a lot more now than we did 3 years ago about how this guy is going to comport himself in office. He's coming apart before our eyes.
Thank you, Governor. A Quinnipiac poll from last month showed more than 70% of voters, including half of Republicans, want Congress to take action on gun violence. Congressman Walsh, you're on record saying you would loosen gun restrictions. Do you have any plans to address gun violence in America?
Look, I'm a big gun guy. I believe in the Second Amendment, plain and simple. There's no silver bullet to this issue. Gun violence is down the last 30 to 40 years. Crimes with guns, murders with guns, the numbers are all good over the last 30 to 40 years. The problem we have now in this country are these mass shootings. There are a lot of things we need to look at, and Anthony, I am a big gun guy, but here's what our focus should be on. We don't want anybody who shouldn't have a gun to have a gun. When I leave here in about an hour, if I go to a gun dealer down the street and I want to buy a gun, I have to get a federal background check. It makes sense to me that if I buy that same gun at a gun show, I should have to undergo a federal background check. It makes the same sense to me that if I buy a gun online, I should have to undergo the background check. It makes similar sense that if I buy that same gun from a friend across town, I should have to undergo a federal background check. We can do things like that, Anthony. I think that will help. But then we've got to really take a serious look at mental health issues in this country.
Governor Weld, do you have plans to address gun violence in America?
Yes. So I'm a longtime federal prosecutor. I was head of the criminal division in Washington. I worked with the FBI unit that deals with serial murderers and other sickos. And I think it's fair to say that the people committing these mass shootings are sickos. So I pretty strongly would favor a version of these red flag laws that enable a co-worker or a family member to petition a judge, and you can get in front of a judge in 6 hours in this country, saying this guy has a history of violence, he's exhibited recent violent tendencies, he's carrying around a list of people he says he'd like to kill, he's talked about his admiration for Osama bin Laden and spoken favorably of Islamic Jihad. These are all trigger words and trigger states. And get in front of a judge and see whether it holds up. And then if so, this guy, and usually these guys have 6 guns at home. You know, take the guns away by all means before something happens there. And that is going to come a lot closer to solving your problem than other solutions which are aimed not at that population, but at everybody.
Thank you, Governor. We have to move on. I'm sorry, Congressman.
So we're nearing the halfway point of the debate. We asked some Republicans and independents what they thought of the Republican Party under Trump and how it'll look going forward. Let's watch.
Rallies like this one in New Mexico last week, filled with energized voters, were the stuff of Republican dreams when they lost to Barack Obama in a landslide in 2012. That year, the RNC published an autopsy on the Republican Party, saying outreach to younger and more diverse voters was the path to a comeback.
The party ended up taking a very different approach because of Donald Trump that nobody would have expected at the time.
Thank you very much, President Trump.
The president has alternately been credited or blamed for blowing up what it means to be a Republican today. On the other hand, many have argued that he is not a cause but rather a result of, among other things, a schism between moderates and conservatives that has been brewing for decades.
This is not the same Republican Party of your parents and your grandparents. This is not the same Republican Party of Ronald Reagan or even George W. Bush. It has changed a lot.
Ronald Reagan had a small thing called Let's Make America Great. That was good. I don't like it as much. And he sure as hell didn't use it as much. We've sold millions and millions of hats. Now you go to a rally, everybody has the red hat, Make America Great Again.
Many supporters of the president, though, are less focused on Republican values and more focused on the man himself.
Well, I consider myself a Trumpican more than a Republican.
Being loyal to the Republican Party is strong, but being loyal to President Trump is a lot stronger to me in my eyes.
Absolutely, Donald Trump over party.
I've never felt the way that I do about President Trump, about any other presidential people before.
But not everyone sees Trump's success as a win for the party.
There is no Republican Party. There's a Trump Party. The Republican Party is kind of taking a nap somewhere.
The Republican Party is, as far as I can tell, is gone, dead, and buried. It's probably never coming back.
Republicans are focused on winning. And right now, Trump has taken hold of the Republican Party.
We are the party of the American worker, the American family, and the American dream.
You know, the Republican Party is having a major identity crisis right now.
Max Boot, a conservative writer and commentator, left the Republican Party in disgust the day after the 2016 election.
You know, watching all of my former friends fall into line behind them, people who were as appalled as I was when Trump started running for president in 2016, I can't figure out who these people are. I mean, it's like the invasion of the body snatchers. I feel like they've had their brains sucked out and replaced with Trumpian mush.
Greg Cheadle, a Republican voter since 2001, was once picked out of a crowd at a Trump rally.
You know what? Look at my African American over here. Look at him.
Cheadle says he didn't mind at first.
I just shouted out, "I'm here." And so everybody around me just burst into this uproarious laughter because it was funny. It was. If you were there, you would have been laughing yourself.
But a steady stream of racist rhetoric out of the White House eventually drove him away from the party he'd been voting for almost 20 years.
I left the Republican Party because I was fed up with the way they were treating others who were not white.
Today, he is running for Congress in California as an independent. Challengers say the president's tendency to lie and his cavalier, tweet-heavy approach to issues like trade and diplomacy are their main motivations. Trump's staunchest supporters argue that while his style is different, his actions, they say, signal a return to the party of Ronald Reagan.
You know, the insistence on conservative judges, the tax cuts, the peace through strength. I mean, I was there in the White House when Reagan met with Gorbachev, you know, and here is the leader of the big bad Soviet Union, you know, come to town. And I think of that every time I see Trump with Kim Jong-un.
Jeffrey Lord, who has often appeared on television relentlessly defending Trump,
if I thought he were a racist, I would never have been here,
has worked for various Republican politicians. And he believes the president has been true to the pillars of the party.
It means you believe in limited government, small government, tax cuts. The social issues, I think the whole pro-life thing has been melded into the Republican Party.
But for many Republicans who have spoken out against the president, it's been a question of the man himself, even for those who eventually fell in line behind him.
Well, I want to talk to the Trump supporters for a minute. I don't know who you are, and I don't know why you like this guy. He's a race-baiting, xenophobic, religious bigot.
He's playing the members of the American public for suckers. He gets a free ride to the White House, and all we get is a lousy hat.
But will Donald Trump's approach get him elected for a second term?
Whether Trump can squeeze out another electoral victory or not,
this is a path towards political suicide for the Republican Party, because if you look at the changing demographics of America, this is going to be a majority-minority country by the 2040s. And if you are identified as the party of white racism, you are not going to be successful in a majority-minority country.
Polls suggest President Trump will become the Republican nominee, but experts say that to beat his eventual Democratic challenger, he'll need to look beyond his base.
The Trump campaign cannot just win the people who voted for them or supported them in 2016. They will lose. They have to take people who never voted for him before, or never would have considered voted for him, and moving them over.
His challengers believe they can appeal to the voters Donald Trump has alienated. The question is, how?
Welcome back. Joining me now at the moderator desk is Business Insider CEO Henry Blodgett. Welcome, Henry.
Thank you, Mr. Fisher. Hello, gentlemen. Very much looking forward to my time with you, but for now, you are in Mr. Fisher's good hands.
Thank you. Governor Weld, when Congressman Walsh announced his candidacy, you said you were, quote, thrilled that others were joining the fight for the Republican nomination. But even the most optimistic polling has you at about 16% when matched up head-to-head with President Trump. It's virtually impossible for you to win the Republican nomination, so how do you see a path to victory?
Oh, I don't agree with that at all. I think I'm probably ahead of where John McCain was in his 2 insurgent campaigns, which were successful in winning the New Hampshire primary. My strategy is to win the New Hampshire primary, not to place, as Pat Buchanan did, and he got 37% of the vote, and even so knocked George Bush 41 off his pins and led to his eventual defeat. There are 5 times in recent elections that a sitting president running for re-election has had a primary from within the party. All 5 times that president lost. Not in the final, but they were weakened and they lost in the general election or else withdrew. But, you know, I go into the diners and shake 200 hands at a time in New Hampshire, and I get between 2 and 10 Trump voters out of 200 people whose hands I shake there. So there's some disconnect there between the polls with a very tight screen that are focusing on the Republican State Committee and its hangers-on and those who voted in the last 5 Republican primary elections. And I'm reaching out not to those Republicans, but to millennials and women and unaffiliated voters, independents, particularly in the crossover states, of which there are 20, and 4 of them are pretty early on: New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Vermont,
Thank you, Governor.
And Wisconsin.
Thank you.
Different strategy.
Congressman Walsh, you're polling even lower than Governor Weld against President Trump. What is your path to the nomination?
And Anthony, I'll get to that answer, but I gotta start there. Look, let's just be clear. Let's not mince words. Donald Trump is a horrible human being. Now, only a very broken political system, right, and a very divided country would produce that. But here's the thing about that. Donald Trump hasn't added 1 new voter in 2.5 years. Not 1 new voter. Yeah, he's got a devoted base of about 35% of this country, but he's going to get beat. If he's the nominee in November, any Democrat will beat him.
But how do you beat him?
Here's how we beat him. Here's how I beat him in the primary. When I say that Donald Trump is a horrible human being, when I say that I'm tired of his drama, I'm tired of his BS, I'm tired of the ugly tweets, I'm tired of the division every single day, when I say that publicly like I do as a candidate every day, I firmly believe most Republican voters, privately, they believe that. The objective of this campaign, Anthony, is to get them to come out and say publicly what they believe privately. And let's not forget what happened today. The president's going to be impeached. This is just beginning.
Thank you, Congressman. I'd like to give you both 30 seconds with a follow-up. The Washington Post found that 40% of congressional Republicans who were in office when President Trump was inaugurated have since retired, resigned, or lost their seats. That's a lot of turnover for a party that controls the White House. Governor Weld, do you think the Republican brand is irreparably damaged?
Yeah, I think it's damaged, and I think the president has no plans to help his fellow Republicans. If you look at the actions he's taken, he's made it impossible for Republicans to run in suburban districts. He's just looking for an electoral, 270 electoral votes for himself, and he doesn't care what happens to the Republicans. And he's, you know, they're spending the entire year defending him, which is what they did with Nixon when he was lying to the American people. And then it turned out that Nixon was lying, and all those Republicans were defeated by a mile. They were blown away the next year.
Thank you,
and
Governor.
I think they're going to get blown away in 2020, those congressional Republicans, because of Trump.
The Republican Party brand sucks. And it sucks because of him. Young people can't stand the party brand. Women can't stand the party brand. People who live in the suburbs can't stand it. And people of color can't stand the Republican Party brand. And as long as Donald Trump is there, that brand will suck. That's why it's so important for people to challenge him in the primary now, so that we can plant our flag and say, this is not who we are.
Thank you, Congressman. You've said that the turning point in your support for President Trump came after he met with Vladimir Putin in Helsinki. He was widely criticized for siding with a foreign leader over his own intelligence agencies. He's also alienated longtime U.S. allies, undermined NATO, and a lot of people think he's completely upended the post-World War II international order. As president, how would you pick up U.S. foreign policy where Trump has left off?
And just one correction, Anthony. Helsinki wasn't the turning point for me. It was the final straw. It was the final straw with Trump when he stood in front of the world and said, I like that guy. I believe Putin and not my own people. I say often, in fact, I say every day, that Donald Trump is unfit. I believe that. I believe that because he can't tell the truth. But more importantly, Anthony, I believe it because he is incapable of thinking or caring about anybody but himself. And so it doesn't matter about American security. He'll sit down and have a summit with Kim Jong-un, no matter how brutal and bad that guy is. If Donald Trump can get a big old photo op, it doesn't matter if it's a bad, horrible thing to invite the Taliban to Camp David, as long as Donald Trump might get the Nobel Peace Prize. We've got a president who can't put the country's interest ahead of ours. We need a president who will put the country's interest first.
Thank you, Congressman. Governor Weld, how would you pick up foreign policy?
Before I get to foreign affairs, 15 seconds, I kind of agree. I mean, I do definitely agree with Congressman Walsh. We have to remember that the president is a sick man. He's a malignant narcissist. He's not happy unless other people are losing. He's a megalomaniac. He's totally wrapped up in his own head. He's filled with fear. He's filled with hatred. He has to offload his anxiety every morning as soon as he wakes up, which is where the tweets come from. He has profound autocratic tendencies. He thinks he's going to be the man on the white horse who's going to save us all. He absolutely does not want to have elections, and he thinks he can take over everything. He's a direct threat to the Bill of Rights and the Constitution. That's A. B, on foreign policy. On foreign policy, I would, re-engage our allies. I'd rejoin the Paris Accord. I would rejoin the JCPOA with Iran from 2015. I would join the Trans-Pacific Partnership. I understand that the uses of military power are self-defense, but also keeping the sea lanes and the air lanes open for free trade among countries. He doesn't even believe in free trade. He doesn't have any conception about foreign policy.
Thank you, Governor. Governor Weld, this question is for you. You ran as the 2016 Libertarian vice presidential candidate, but shortly before the election, you went on TV to, quote, vouch for the character of Hillary Clinton. A lot of Republicans said they were voting against Hillary Clinton more than they were voting for Donald Trump. Do you think this could pose a problem for you now that you're running as a Republican again?
Yeah, it could, but I always tell the truth. You know, I call him like I see him, and I don't care who knows it, and I've known her for a long time. I don't think she's a crook. I don't think she belongs in jail. Nobody was standing up for her. Nobody. Maybe Donna Brazil from the Democratic National Committee. But I thought that was kind of odd. You know, I've known her a long time. I've known her to mentor a lot of people. So I said, I'll vouch for her personally. It was not a political endorsement, although it was widely taken as such by my people who were not in the Bill Weld camp. But that's why I did it, and I would do it again because I think it's only being honest and trying to rescue someone from a bully. I despise bullies.
Thank you, Governor. Congressman Walsh, according to a Kaiser poll from this month, more than half of Americans have a favorable view of the Affordable Care Act, or Obamacare as it's commonly known. For the past 8 years, Republicans have been working to defund or repeal Obamacare. Congressman, how would your administration work to ensure all Americans have access to health care?
Anthony, this would probably be, if I'm elected president, the issue I would start with. There's no more important issue in this country than this. We've got the American people living longer and longer and longer. That's a good thing. But how we pay for the health care for all of these Americans living longer and longer and longer, neither the Republican Party or the Democrat Party want to talk about that. And you've got Democrats out there, again, well-meaning Democrats saying Medicare for all, just have the government do everything. And then you've got Republicans out there, Anthony, saying nothing, because they're afraid to talk about health care. It would be the issue I'd want to lead a discussion on, because
so what would you do?
Here's the issue. We have to take care of and make sure that people in need in this country and those people with chronic health care conditions are always taken care of and never have to worry about their health care needs. The rest of the American people need to begin paying for the day-to-day health care costs, and then look at things like universal catastrophic coverage.
Thank you, Congressman. Governor Weld, how would your administration work to ensure Americans have access to health care?
Well, I think I'd try to have Americans have the option of having health savings accounts where they could set money aside on a tax advantage basis to create their own plan, instead of having the government mandate everyone's got to have a Cadillac plan. And people do make such decisions all the time. People buy insurance with no deductible if they can't take a hit, with a big deductible if they want to have their premium go down. People make their decisions to buy prescription drugs in Canada, to buy insurance across state lines, which they're not allowed to do right now because of the government. So I'd want to skinny down the role of the government in the Affordable Care Act and place more decisions in the hands of patients and their doctors, and have people making their own healthcare decisions instead of having that all come from a federal bureaucracy.
Anthony, can I jump in?
15 seconds, sure.
Yeah, because this is really, really important. Nobody talks about how much this is ever going to cost. And to the young people in the audience, your country right now is almost $23 trillion in debt. I'll be long gone. I'm not going to pay that back. You are. This country's got to have an honest discussion about how we pay off our debt.
Thanks so much, Congressman. According to Pew Research, about half of Republicans feel immigrants are a burden on this country, while most Democrats say immigrants strengthen the country. Governor Weld, how do you plan to talk to your fellow Republicans about immigrants in the U.S.?
I'm going to tell them the truth. We need more work visas, not fewer. Immigrants made this country great. It's a melting pot. Donald Trump wishes it weren't a melting pot. I want to wish him a lot of luck on that. You know, I think the whole canard about, oh, these 11 million people, they didn't stand in line, they all want to be citizens. They don't want to be citizens. A lot of them are people who overstayed their visa by 1 week, as I've done coming back from Europe on a 30-day visa. So the whole thing is a scare tactic by President Trump in order to stir up the pot and have people hating. He wants people to hate, like Big Brother in the Orwell novel, 1984. He wanted everyone to hate. He would beam hate into their heads 2 minutes every afternoon. And Trump started with the Muslims. He went on to Hispanics, and he went on to people of color. He always has to have someone to hate, and it's pure politics, and it's the lowest kind of low. I mean, to say he's divisive is an understatement. And now Steve Bannon, his Robespierre, says if he's reelected, there's going to be 4 years of unrequited payback. Payback for what? This guy is unhinged.
Thanks so much, Governor.
The governor's right. For Trump, it is just a scare tactic. But listen to me. For the American people, it's a real issue. People in this country illegally, and what do we do about it? It's a real issue. Are we a sovereign nation? Do we have borders? Are we going to defend those borders? It's a real issue, not a scare tactic to a lot of Americans. The governor's right. When it comes to people coming here legally, the more the merrier. And it shouldn't matter, and doesn't matter what your color is. It doesn't matter what your creed is. It doesn't matter what country you come from. None of that matters. We welcome you if you want freedom and opportunity. When it comes to people in this country illegally and people who come here illegally, again, that's another issue where Republicans and Democrats have to find a solution. Because you live on the border right now, you live in Texas and Arizona right now. It's easy to say right here in our Manhattan studio that we don't have a problem with illegal immigration in this country. Live on the border for a month. It's a real issue that impacts Americans. Neither party is prepared to talk about it.
Thank you, Congressman. I'm going to turn the reins over to Henry Blodgett.
Thank you, Mr. Fisher. Hello again, gentlemen. Staying on immigration for a minute, let's just do a follow-up, Congressman, on that. How do you bridge that difference between Republicans and Democrats? How do you solve this issue of 11 million people?
we both got to give. And I have a reputation as a pretty hardliner on immigration. So I got to give. And I want my borders secure. I want our laws followed. But we've got 11 to how many people in this country illegally? We got almost 1 million dreamers who are here through no fault of their own. Both sides have to come together and give a little on this issue because it's not getting better. There has to be a trade-off between border security and dealing with the immigrants who are here. And the biggest problem at the border right now, Henry, is this asylum issue. And that's something we got to move on a lot faster.
I'll come back to that in just a sec. Governor Weld, how would you solve
Well, I mean, I agree with the congressman. Now, all the people who are worried about the immigrants being in our midst, they deserve to have a secure southern border. But that's not rocket science. And all the experts say what you really need to secure the Mexican border is more people and more drones. You need more judges to handle asylum cases. You need more people to process the refugees and regular applicants coming in from El Salvador and Guatemala and Honduras. And that's what all the experts say we need. And it's probably not as expensive as a 200-mile-long, 200-foot-high wall, but that should be number one, and then everything else is easy once everyone relaxes about the immigrants.
Hey, Henry, Trump is just a demagogue, and he did such great disservice to this. All he talked about was a wall and Mexico is going to pay for it. It's so much more complicated than that.
And so a question for both of you on the southern border. We have a crisis of a situation. President Trump, his hardline stance on immigration has been extremely popular with a lot of his supporters. It's part of what got him elected. Yet he has done things that have shocked Americans and the world. Detention, unlimited detention in crowded camps, separating families. How would you solve the actual crisis now on the southern border?
Well, and again, the distinction that President Trump won't make politically is people who cross our border and enter illegally to come into this country illegally, and people who come here legally to claim asylum. You have a right from anywhere on this planet to come to our country and claim asylum. Those people we need to treat humanely. And those are the people, Henry, that, as Governor Weld said, man, we've got to adjudicate their cases a heck of a lot quicker, keep families together. Most of the people who claim asylum, especially when they're given a lawyer, and I bet most of your audience doesn't know, if you come here to claim asylum and it takes 2 years or more to adjudicate your case. But most of these folks, when they're given a lawyer, they show up for their hearing. We just got to devote the resources, money and resources, for more judges down at the border. It shouldn't take 2 years. It should take 2 months.
And Governor Weld, is that your solution?
Yes, it is. Money for more people in adjudicatory positions and border agents. And drones to catch the bad guys coming across the soccer field at Tijuana, and the coyotes who prey on people coming across the soccer field.
Another question on immigration for both of you. And Congressman Walsh, you raised this issue earlier. Younger voters tend to lean more liberal with respect to immigration. They tend to be more inclusive with respect to race and religion, and they voted in record numbers in the 2018 midterms. Back in 2012, the Republican Party itself said, quote, young voters are increasingly rolling their eyes at what the party represents. Congressman Walsh, to be elected president, you will presumably want to appeal to younger voters. How do you get them past that?
And Henry, it's even worse now. Sometimes I just feel like an old guy, an old white guy, when I talk to Americans in their 20s and 30s, because they've got issues that really interest them, like climate change, like the LGBT community, like immigration, that they care deeply about. And our party right now is so tone deaf. I think we've got to be honest and frank and be willing to dialogue. One of the big problems with the Republican Party, my party, and it's gotten so much worse under him, is we don't dialogue with minority communities. We don't dialogue with the LGBT community, and we don't know how to talk to young people. Immigration's a big issue. And as long as we have a border, Henry, that border needs to be secured. And that message needs to be conveyed to young people, but then the Republican Party's got to understand that we got to be a lot more humane, again, especially with a population like the Dreamers who came here through no fault of their own.
Thank you, Congressman. Governor Weld, how would you appeal?
I'll give you another reason why we need to lighten up a little bit on our anti-immigrant rhetoric, particularly in the left half of the country. I spent a lot of time Texas and West in the last cycle, and you could not populate, you cannot staff either the agricultural industry or the construction industry, either in Texas or anywhere west of Texas in this country, all the way up to the border without, yes, those brown people coming across that infamous Mexican border to supply the necessary labor. And it's going to happen one way or the other, or those industries are going to shut down in the West. And the business of America is, by and large, quite pro-immigration for this reason. Canada has a very robust guest worker program that allows, on top of the table, allows many, many people to come and work for 4 months. They send the remittances home to, yes, Mexico, but also, yes, Guatemala, El Salvador, Honduras, troubled countries of origin, and then they go home after 4 months because they want to be with their families. They don't want to come here by themselves without their family and stay indefinitely. That's a hugely successful program. We should have one like it.
Hey, Henry, think about this. The President of the United States, what, 2 months ago, told 4 brown-skinned congresswomen to go back to where they came from. Now, is it any surprise that most young people think the Republican Party is anti-immigrant? Most Republicans I know, Henry, are not anti-immigrant. They're anti-illegal. Because of Trump and, truthfully, a lot of Republican rhetoric, we've done a lousy job of conflating that.
So following up on that, Congressman Walsh, you supported back in 2016 the Make America Great campaign, Great Again. You've said racist things in the past. You've called President Obama a Muslim as recently as last year. How do you persuade Republican voters, younger voters, and America to trust you, the people who fear Trump's racism?
I helped create Trump, period. I went to Washington 8-9 years ago, obsessed with the fact that we're bankrupting future generations. I was part of that Tea Party wave, focused on the issues, but plenty of times over the last 7 or 8 years, I got lost of the issues. And I engaged, like many of my Tea Party comrades did, I engaged in personal, hateful rhetoric, some of which, Henry, I got to live with the whole rest of my life. And knowing that I helped create Trump. This may be a lousy thing to say on TV, but I'm going to say it. Maybe a reformed gang member or a reformed outlaw like me, sorry, Helene, who understands, Henry, some of what I did and we did to help create Trump can help bring the country together and heal the divide.
Governor Weld, would you like to respond to that?
It makes me very nervous because if my wife thinks you're Jesse James, she's going to want to run off with you. Yeah, no, I love working with a congressman, and you know, I think his head is in exactly the right place about the present and the future of politics in the United States.
Switching topics. President Trump routinely rages against the media. He denounces respected news organizations as, quote, fake news and, quote, enemies of the people. Recently, he even blasted Fox News as, quote, not working for us anymore. Everybody gets frustrated by press coverage they don't like, including me. But a free press is a part of our Constitution and a cornerstone of our democracy. Congressman Walsh, you are in the media now. What do you think of President Trump's attacks on the media, and how will you handle your own frustration with the media as president?
It's abhorrent, but again, where's it come from? He's not a president. Donald Trump doesn't think of himself like a president. He's a dictator. He doesn't respect the First Amendment. He doesn't know what the First Amendment is. Can we just be real? I mean, come on. Dictators, Henry, speak that way. The enemy of the people. But this isn't unusual at all. Fake news, I get it. The media is too liberal. The media is too conservative. I understand talk like that. But for the President of the United States to have declared war on CNN and Business Insider and the rest of the media is abhorrent to everything we believe in America. Henry, no matter who the next president is, their job is going to be to unite. Unite us with our allies. Unite Americans at home. Unite different members of the media. This guy took a divided country and he's hell-bent on dividing it even more. If I'm elected president, I'm going to try to unite us.
Governor Weld?
Amen to the emphasis on unity. I think that, when the president said a free press is the enemy of the people, that's straight out of the handbook, the playbook of Benito Mussolini and Adolf Hitler and many, many other dictators through history. And it just sent a chill down my spine. And he's given so many indicia that he wants to dismantle our democratic institutions, including free and fair elections, one by one, and knock down all those trees until there'd be no resisting him. And it's very clear that's what's in his head. He has a book in his house, The Greatest Speeches of Adolf Hitler, which is, according to testimony at his first divorce trial, one of his favorite books. This guy is, he's just way out there, and I think we have begun to see in the last 2 months him coming unglued. And it's time for him to be removed. That's what's going to save us all. It's not going to be Donald Trump. It's going to be the absence of Donald Trump.
Brief follow-up for both of you on the press. The president is an employee of all of us, and there is a room in the White House which used to be used for press briefings. But the current president decided to cancel press briefings because, apparently, according to the new press secretary, he was annoyed at some of the questions. As president, would both of you commit to using our collective press briefing room in the White House?
Yes, and attending the White House Correspondents' Dinner. Thank you.
Henry, he's a child. If you say something nice about him, he likes you. If you don't, he doesn't. Look, I'm pretty darn outspoken. I love speech. I believe in total transparency, and I will invite the media to the White House all the time.
Thank you, both. We appreciate it. We in the media. This will be the last question of the evening, and then we'll go to closing statements. You both have made very impassioned, compelling arguments why this country should effectively unelect President Trump and nominate and then elect you. But you have a problem. In a recent speech, President Trump bragged about the loyalty of his supporters. Let's listen.
We have the greatest base, I believe, in the history of politics, or I wouldn't be here. With all the things I've done, they never wavered. They never wavered. Can you believe anybody else? They'd be down to 2% right now.
President Trump even famously joked that he could shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue and he wouldn't lose any voters. And he seems to have a point. No matter what he says or does, his approval rating does not seem to drop much below 40%. So, Congressman Walsh, what is your plan to break through that? What one of our viewers describes as, quote, blind devotion to President Trump?
By trying to convey two things, that this country cannot handle 4 more years of his BS. The country will be endangered, period. And Henry, I firmly believe, like I know Bill Weld believes, deep down, most Republicans know that. They're afraid to say it. They need an alternative. The other message I want to convey to Republican voters this next year is Donald Trump hadn't done squat for you. Donald Trump hasn't done anything for you. Governor talked about he was going to drain the swamp. He is the swamp. He is the swamp, the most corrupt president we've had in this nation's history. All he's done is enrich himself. All he's done is go to his golf courses, have members of foreign governments stay at his hotels, and middle-class Americans who put their faith in him in Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. These tariffs, Trump's tariffs, are killing them. And Henry, for the first time now, we're beginning to lose manufacturing jobs in Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. This guy hasn't delivered for, it's a big con job. He hasn't delivered for them.
Thank you, Congressman. Governor Weld, you have likened President Trump to the emperor with no clothes. We saw that earlier. That is a reference to a fable about a leader parading down a main street wearing nothing but his birthday suit, and he has so brainwashed his subjects that everybody thinks he's wearing beautiful clothes. How do you plan to show Republican voters that our emperor has no clothes?
Well, you know, he does have pretty strong support among a segment of the electorate, which is somewhere in the 30s, between 30 and 40%. I tend to think that's going to drop. It's certainly not going to grow. That's not a majority. That's not even close to a majority. So very hard for me to see how he can recover and grow that base that he has to win the election. Beyond that, I think it's going to be a tough 6 months and 12 months for the president, partly because he is being called on the carpet now through the impeachment process, and there are going to be daily very bad bits of very bad news for him. The House is not going to go out of its way, either in the House or in the Senate, to gild the lily there. They're going to say exactly what Donald Trump has done and what it's done to the American people. And that will be a political brief, if you will, and it's going to be hard to disregard because it's going to be on page 1 of the newspapers every day between tomorrow and the election in 2020. I think he's got a hard road ahead of him.
Thank you, Governor Weld. Thank you, Congressman Walsh. Before we end tonight's debate, we invite you both to give a closing statement where you explain to America and the world why you should be president. Governor Weld, you have 1 minute.
Well, again, I want to thank Business Insider. This is really great for both of us, and I think for the country. You will have seen tonight from both me and the congressman that there are tried and true Republican conservative policies that we would like to see deployed by the party in Washington. It could be conserving our financial resources, as with the budget, conserving our precious natural environment, as with climate change, could be conserving the dignity of all Americans, which Mr. Trump wants to undermine, depending on what minority group you belong to. And most important from my point of view as a small L libertarian, conserving the precious individual liberties of all Americans. And so I think Congressman and I would like to see those adopted by the Republican Party. It is a right-of-center country. We're not left-of-center like many of our European friends. And I think this has been a terrific evening. And so my closing wish is from this night forward, let the dialogue continue.
Thank you, Governor. Congressman?
I end where I began. A very broken political system put a horrible human being in the White House. An absolutely horrible human being. We can do better. We have to do better than a president who tweets ugly insults every morning at the American people. We have to do better than a president who lies to us every time he opens his mouth. We've got to do better than a president who has zero respect for the rule of law. This guy can't get reelected. Bill and I have said he's destroying the Republican Party. Forget about the Republican Party. 4 more years of him, this country is in danger. I believe most Republicans feel as I do about Trump. And what I'm trying to do is to get them to be brave enough to come out and come public with what they know privately. If you're willing to be brave and say, man, I feel this way about Trump, I'm tired of the BS, I'm coming out, go to joewalsh.org. Go to joewalsh.org and be brave. Governor Weld, thank you. Business Insider, you rock. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
And that concludes Business Insider's 2020 Republican presidential primary debate. I'd like to thank my colleagues Lynette Lopez and Henry Blodgett. Thank you to the candidates, Governor Bill Weld, Congressman Joe Walsh. Thanks for watching us on Facebook. Join us at businessinsider.com for more coverage of all the 2020 races. And we'll see you tomorrow for another episode of Business Insider Today.
Great.